Okay, Uglies, the first book in a 4-book series by Scott Westerfeld. Now, I haven't read a lot of young adult fiction since the Hunger Games trilogy, so when I picked this book up, as I explained in my last video, I found the language, like, a little different, kind of simple, and a little too easy. And another thing, it's in large print. I don't know if anybody who probably if you read young adult all the time, you probably don't realize that it is in larger print. So when you first see the book, you're like, wow, look at how thick it is. You're thinking, oh my god, this book's going to be really long, and it's going to be like a super hard read. But no, in reality, because the language is kind of easy, simple, and the print is kind of large, I flew through it. I think I picked this book up, I think I read it in like less than a week. I read it in like a matter of like 2-3 days. It was pretty easy to read. Scott Westerfeld, I guess, has written other novels. He has 5 adult novels that he has written, and another young adult series, which I've never heard of any of these books. But not that that's a bad thing, because the story was really well written. He made the story engaging. The characters were people once you started reading it, you started to care about the characters. And the main character is Tally Youngblood, who I'll have to explain the whole thing. And for people who have not read this book, there's going to be spoilers. I'm going to explain this world, why it is the way it is, different things about the book, like different categories of people, and my insight on them. Okay, so Uglies is set in the dystopian world, this future world that you don't really know how far into the future it is in comparison to our world, but there are a lot of clues like within the book that let you know that it takes place on the United States West Coast, and I'm assuming that it's in California where the story takes place, because as you get further into the story, they talk about certain areas of the country and being by the sea and following railroad tracks up north. And then they mention near the end, he mentions how, like, if you didn't follow the directions the right way, you could have ended up in Alaska. So that really pinpoints the area of the world where the book takes place. One of the things that is kind of not cool when it comes to dystopian future and books, and I really like this about the way Scott Westerfeld did this, because he kept you enthralled, was that at first, when he introduces you to this really strange world of the Uglies, and he just slowly over time it evolves, and he explains how this world came about and why it is the way it is. Well, to some extent, I have to say. Well, anyways, one of the things I want to say, when you first see the title Uglies, you're like, who are these Uglies and what are they? Well, basically, the Uglies are anyone who is over the age, they're like 12 to almost 16 are considered Uglies. Now, before that, littlies, which are like children, will live with their parents, which are called mid-pretties, and they live in the suburbs near New Pretty Town, but not in New Pretty Town, because New Pretty Town is only for pretties, like young pretties. And they call the suburbs Crumblyville. There's a lot of like little like language and slang that pertains just to this world, which is kind of unique, and he builds this world up so it's really believable. And Tally Youngblood, the book starts out on her own. It's a few months before her 16th birthday. Now, on your 16th birthday, they take you in to get your operation, and you become a pretty. Now, a pretty is someone who lives in New Pretty Town, And they are basically these people, they have like a cosmetic surgery to, like, they do everything. Like, they'll make a short person taller, they'll make them more fuller if they're too skinny, or they'll suck the fat out if they're too fat. I mean, it's just a whole, it's like the full operation you can get. And they even scour off their skin, they mentioned, so that new skin can grow. And I guess they do this operation in like a tank that's almost like the, if you've ever seen The Empire Strikes Back when Luke is getting repaired and he's in the water tank, I guess it's in something like that. So being an ugly, the world, which norm for them is like bullying, and they tend to pick on each other and point out something that they think makes something unique about that normal person that makes them ugly in a way. Like, Tally's best friend is Paris, and she used to call him Nose. And the story starts out where she goes to try to find him in New Pretty Town and seek him out, and he's different in some way. Like, he's not the old Paris that she knew. And on this misadventure, she does something to escape, and she runs into who will become her new friend, a girl named Shay. And she gets to know this girl named Shay and finds out that they share the same birthday, but they live in two different dorms, I guess. Like, because when they leave their parents' house and come to live in Uglyville, they stay in dorms and they go to school, like it's almost like college. But, and eventually Shay shares with her this place called the Ruins, and the Ruins is an old city that's like miles from Uglyville where they live, and they mention how they go there on school field trips every once in a while because it's like a history thing. And the Ruins kind of leads to some of the background of the world story, and they called our people, like us, the Rusties. And they really talk about, like, they're all about environmental friendliness. They're all, like, about being green. Like, their clothes can be recycled. They, like, everything is, and then, like, they use solar power for everything. And they don't use gasoline. And there's a reason why they don't use gasoline. You find out later in the story, about near the mid to near end, that there was a petrol plague that some other nation had released into the world. And I had heard this idea of a petrol plague before in another book. I can't recall the name of that book, but it's not a new phenomenon in science fiction, and I wonder if it is a real possibility that they can design something like that. Because I guess Scott Westerfeld, like, developed these books from emails he was writing back and forth with some guy. And that's how he came up with the story. Well, anyways, to get back to the story, Shay slowly introduces her to this other world that, like, she never knew existed outside of Uglyville, and tries to convince her to run away with her. Shay does run away, and she runs away to what they call the Smoke, which are these people who live their lives as normal people, but, you know, they're still ugly. They're not pretties. And eventually, you know, knowing that she hopes that her friend Tally will come to the Smoke, she leaves her a cryptic note so that she will follow. Now, Tally thinks that she is going to become a pretty on her birthday. She goes to the hospital awaiting the procedure, only to be set up, and she's sitting there for hours waiting. And then eventually this car shows up and takes her to an isolated location in the city, and this is where they introduce the specials. Specials are, this just makes this story even more wild, because the specials are not just pretties, they're not just modified to be beautiful people, they are humans with enhanced abilities, and the way Scott Westerfeld writes about them, they almost sound animalistic. Like, introduces the main villain of the story, Dr. Cable. And Dr. Cable, every time she speaks, he says it's with a razor-like voice. And they have, like, sharp teeth, and they're almost like, they talk about them like they're cat people. Like, that's just the vision I got, because they move really fast, and they're really strong and athletic. It's not like monsters, but they're still beautiful. And it's, at this point, you know, Tally finds out they already know everything, and they kind of dupe her into trying to get her to reveal, you know, where did your friend go? We know she took off, and she made a promise to her friend. You know, she became really close with this girl, and she didn't want to betray her, but they had already had a copy of the note, but they didn't know what it meant. So they say to her, well, you know, because they have this power over these people, that they think being normal is being ugly, and that it's like the most horrible thing you could have happen to you is to grow old and ugly and not be a normal person. So this Dr. Cable holds this over Tally's head and says, hey, you have to become a spy and betray your friend. Show us where she went. We're going to give you this little necklace. It's a homing device, and it's retina scanned, so like when you look into it, it'll flash and we'll be there in a few hours. So, I mean, the special circumstances, which is what they call this select group of specials, even tries to have her family and her old best friend Paris try to convince her that this is, you know, making a promise to this girl was just an ugly little promise, that you need to help us find this group of people who we've been looking for years, because they talk about this main hero guy, and his name is David. Now, the whole time they're explaining how the Uglies go to meet this guy named David in the ruins, I'm thinking, hey, it's an older guy, because they make him sound like, you know, somebody who's been living out in the wild, like, or in another city or something. You eventually find out that David's really just an older teenager. He's really just like around 18 or whatever. They never reveal how old he is, but they just say he's a little bit older, but he's around a teenager's age, because it makes the other Uglies feel comfortable when they meet him, I guess. So anyway, she has a bunch of misadventures when she tries to decode Shay's note to get to the smoke. And she runs into another batch of pretties from another city, which ties in with her clues about how to find the place. And they reveal how, like, there's a certain flower that's growing in the world that somebody made so that it's really hardy and really plentiful, and it's so bad that it became a weed in this age, because it chokes out the growth of every other plant and creates dead zones where there's nothing but sand because of these orchids. And these groups of these pretties she meets are burning the flowers, trying to prevent them from spreading everywhere. So it's a really, really different world. I mean, it's, you know, and she doesn't know what the helicopter is that they're flying in, and she's kind of scared of it, so she hid it first. But she eventually gets to the smoke and starts to hang out with these people, and she talks to them and gets to know, like, she sees, like, magazines and books from our world, and sees that, hey, you know, being pretty was not all it was about to be. So she's made the smoke her new home, and she's come to accept that she does not want to be a pretty. She does not want to betray her friend Tally, and she falls in love with David. And she finds out what it's like to, you know, to be a normal person, to work hard and not party and all that stuff that, which she would have had the life in New Prettyville. Because I guess pretties, that's all they do, is they just party. Like, they have parties every night, and they, you know, they get dressed up and they fuck around, shit like that. And she realizes that there's more to life than being a pretty. And David introduces her to his parents, and the cool thing is David was never raised in the city. His parents were two people who were pretties, and they were the doctors who made people into pretties. They were the surgeons or whatnot, and they discovered a secret that they didn't know, that during the process of making certain pretties, because not all pretties are turned this way, but there's a brain, like, almost, I can't say it's a lobotomy, but certain pretties are lobotomized, and I have to say that with quotes, because they don't care about certain things. All they care about is being pretty and not questioning things. And they notice this, and they want to change this, so that's why they leave the city and start the colony called the Smoke. And they reveal this to Tally on David's urgings, because David tells his parents, hey, you know, I met this girl, she came to the city, she came to the Smoke all by herself, she's really smart, and I think she has a right to know all this stuff. So, you know, and eventually, you know, like, after this revelation, she goes with David, and this is when she's made her final choice that she is not going to betray the Smoke. She takes off her necklace, throws it in the fire, and unknowingly when she did that, the pendant got destroyed, and it sent a signal to the special circumstances to the location of where she was. So when Tally awakes in the morning, she finds out that the specials are there in their hover cars, and they're there to take in everyone and make them pretty, unless they resist. Because they repeat over and over again, we do not want to harm you unless you make us. And the fight scenes, and it's kind of intense because she tries to get away, and then people start, you know, there was a little bit of suspicion from people in the Smoke. They kind of questioned, you know, this girl, like, based on what she brought, like her supplies and stuff, was she really in the wild that long before she got here, and this and that, and they kind of suspect her treachery, but they're not 100% sure of it. And the doctor tries to use this again and says, hey, we're going to bring you back to and make her a pretty since she revealed the location of this place. Her friends get captured, and she escapes with David. And now that it's just the two of them, David says we have to go back, and she agrees and says they have to go back and get our friends. We have, because the Smoke is destroyed at this point. The specials have destroyed the village, and they make the determination to go and sneak into. It's, you know, they don't really say, is it Uglyville or is it Pretty Town, but wherever this city is, the city that Tally is from, they make the decision to go in to special circumstances and release their friends. They eventually do this, and they set up a new Smoke with so they use the help of the current Uglies that are students in the dorms, because they run into a few of them to help bring about this plan of escape. And they start up a new legend that the Smoke still lives, and just they think, you know, they got it all under control, and then his mom finds a cure for the brain lesions, the lobotomy, but they want to try it out on Shay. Now, Shay has become a pretty at this point, but she does not want to go back to being a normal person, and she likes being the pretty that she is. So Tally makes a decision that she will turn herself in to become a pretty, to try out this new drug that will correct your brain. And she gives herself up with Tally. And that's how the story ends. Just like that. It just ends. And when you first read this, because you followed Tally through this whole story, you're like, no, she's going back. She's given in, and will she ever go back to the Smoke? So that was kind of a big letdown, and you're reading this and you're like hoping that it's just she's gonna escape and they're gonna live happily ever after, but no, it starts all over again with a new book, the second book in the series, Pretties, which I just picked up and I started reading the first chapter of. So tell me your thoughts and revelations on the book Uglies. What did you think of it? I thought it was a great story. I really, really liked it. I couldn't get into it at first. Like I said, slow read at first. But I loved it. Once I started reading it, and about part 2 or part 3 of the book was epic. And I also, like, that's my, I think that's why they make books like this in large print, to make them thick looking and make them look epic. But yeah, so that's my review of Uglies, and I hope you liked this video. Peace.